we've been looking at different kinds of ways of making long sentence structures recently. So what we're going to look at today is participle clauses. The way that we make sentences longer in English is generally by adding new clauses to them. And we've looked at a lot of different ways. Can anyone tell me what ways have we looked at adding clauses to sentences over the past couple of weeks? Can anyone tell me?
Which?
So what's which? What's that called? Which introduces a relative clause.
Relative.
Yeah. So a relative clause is a section of a sentence which gives information about the main clause. Okay, so that's a relative clause. What other ways can we add clauses to sentences?
Conjunction and
Addition.
Linkers.
We can add addition, yeah, with linkers. Okay, so we can put and. I like cycling and I go out very often. Yeah, okay, using and to add a new verb clause. In addition, additionally, yeah, in addition to, as well as, along with, associated with, okay, together with, all of those ones. So that's addition, relative clauses. What else have we got?
language. Also,
Results, yeah, resulting in.
Resulting.
The result, yeah, that's good. We've got causes, because of, due to, as a result of.
On the other hand.
On the other hand, well, we don't generally use that in OET, on the other hand.
Just from what
Contrast.
Well, yeah, on the other hand is used to show contrast. It's used in academic language to say, well, this is one thing, but on the other hand, we don't generally use that in OET, but we would use but, despite, in spite of, although, however. So all of those phrases enable us to put another idea together with the one before it. Now, however, is the only one out of all of those where you have to start a new sentence. All of the others were ones that you can begin a sentence with possibly and then add two clauses separated with a comma, or you put it in the middle with two clauses either side. Relative clauses always come after something, so you can put it in the middle of the clause, but it comes after the subject, as we've looked at, or you can put it at the end after a comma. Now we're going to look at participle clauses today, which is another way that we can add something to a sentence. Participle clauses are a little bit complicated. I'm only going to teach a very basic version of it, which is what we need for OET writing. Okay, that's why I'm not really in this program focusing on defining relative clauses either, because we've only looked at non-defining relative clauses. I'm not looking at defining because we don't generally use them in OET writing. And that's what this is all about. Learning the skills and the tools that will enable us to write sentences well in OET. So let's do a little bit of a review of clauses. Okay, so we've only looked at non-defining relative clauses. I'm not looking at defining because we don't generally use them in OET writing. Sorry, guys. So let's have a look at here then. Participle clauses, all right, they are something which I think is more frequently used in OET reading than OET writing. However, people do use them in OET writing sometimes. And in fact, last week, I saw some really good writing in the nurses writing week, which did use participle clauses. So like many things in English, when you use them well, they're good. But when you don't use them well, it's really obvious. Okay. And like something like as well as, everybody knows my opinion about as well as. I think it's more trouble than it's worth. Okay, when it works, okay, great. You've got it right and it's got a good function of addition, but it's so easy to get it wrong. There's so many different ways to get it wrong that I don't think the the reward of getting it right is worth the risk of getting it wrong. And it's the same with participle clauses generally, not always, but generally. There are two different types that we're going to talk about today. And one of them I would say avoid. The other one I would say, that's a good clause. So let's just do a quick review. You guys can tell me what we've got here. So number one, how many clauses?
two,
Two clause.
Two. Connected by what?
but,
Okay, next sentence, how many clauses?
Two.
Connected by what?
despite,
Okay, now, if I was to pick out Clara.
yes,
Hi, Clara. What function have the linkers got in these two sentences?
a contrast,
They're both contrasting. Now,
Yes.
are they exactly the same?
no,
Why are they different?
they use a different linker or contrast, but
Yeah,
and despite, and despite is following by a noun clause,
that's
and
what
but with a verb clause.
Brilliant. Yeah. Okay. So every time we choose to add something to the sentence, we've got to respect the grammar. So you can't just put despite in here. You can put but there, and you can't put but here in this sentence. Same function, different grammar. So what you've got to think to yourself is, just like with cooking, okay, with cooking, if you're cooking a nice meal and you're following a good recipe, you can't just say, you know what, I'm going to throw in some chocolate. Chocolate might not be good for that recipe. You've got to respect it, or it will taste bad. Okay, it's the same with this. Whenever you think of adding a new idea to a sentence, you've got to stop and think, what's the grammar for this? That's what your approach has to be when you're developing your language and you're practicing in our writing weeks or submitting work to the writing team. You've got to make sure that you're trying to make your sentences as accurate as possible. Okay, how about this last one? What have we got here? How many clauses do we think we've got?
Three.
Yeah, so I think there's two ways of looking at this. One is to say we've got a main clause and
Relative
a
clause.
relative clause, yeah. And then other people might say, well, inside the relative clause, we've also got an extra clause. So that's connected with and, isn't it? Yeah. Notice what we said. What is also cheaper than living in London? What is also cheaper than living in London?
Additional
Manchester.
Not Manchester.
Living.
all lives in
Living in Manchester. Yes. Okay, so which in this sentence means living in Manchester. That's what it's about, isn't it? Okay, so let's move on. I'm going to give you a sentence and I want you to tell me if you like it and if you wish that you wrote sentences like this.
Paul, I have a question.
Oh yeah, go on, Safi. What's the question?
Regarding the second, the relative clause in the last sentences,
Mhm.
can we connect the two last clauses with which again, instead of and?
Yeah, you can, but why would you do it? It's strange. You wouldn't do it. Yeah, no one would do that. But you would put and, because what we're doing is we're adding some information, aren't we? And it's the same subject. So why would I do a relative clause again? I don't need to. It's just the same subject, so I'll just use and. It's the simplest way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. So let me show you a sentence, guys. You tell me whether.
Paul, sorry, this number 3 sentence, I didn't get the meaning. Paul lives in Manchester, which is convenient for working in London. What does it mean?
Okay. So where's Manchester and where's London? What am I suggesting here?
not far away.
What do you think it means?
Living.
Now, do you feel like Manchester's close to London?
No, it's far away.
It's far away, but actually, you can get the train to London in 2 hours from Manchester. So that's what I'm saying. So you can get the train down to London and it's convenient. You can get the train back very easily, but it's also cheaper than Manchester. That makes sense, Asia?
It
Thank
will
you.
confuse me as well last time you mentioned this sentence.
It is convenient for working in London. Lots of people live in Manchester and get the train down to London and then come back and have a cheaper house up in the north where their money goes further. All right, let's move on though. Look, let's go and look at this. Look at this sentence, guys. Would you like to write this sentence? Okay, let's have a look at it. Having been diagnosed with meningitis, Mrs. Smith was prescribed with IV antibiotics, which were commenced on the 4th of June and will finish 7 days after he or she is discharged. What do you think? Is that a good sentence?
I'm happy with that.
Really?
You're happy with it, Safi? Anyone unhappy with it? How many ideas are in there?
3.
Too many.
Too many.
No,
Four.
meningitis, antibiotics,
Okay,
and
diagnosed with meningitis,
3.
prescribed antibiotics, when they start and when they finish.
Probably 4.
Four ideas.
Yeah, 4 ideas.
Now, you know, I often in writing week will say to people, you've got too many ideas in that sentence. But I think that what happens is this, as your grammar gets better, you can include more ideas in your sentences. So at the beginning, when you're first learning linkers, it's a good idea to say, I'm just going to put 2 ideas in this sentence. Then you get a little bit better and you learn about relative clauses, and then you realize you can extend a relative clause and you end up with a sentence like, I am writing regarding Mrs. Smith, who is recovering from Y and requires Z. Okay, then you end up with 3 ideas in a sentence. Okay, then as you get better and better and better, you start to be able to add a few more in. Now, me personally, I look at that sentence and think, if somebody wrote that in my writing week, I'd be really happy. The reason why is not because it's like fireworks, it's spectacular. It's just good. The grammar's accurate and it's using what we would call a participle clause at the beginning. Okay. Then it's using a relative clause. Oops. It's using addition. It's using a passive. Oops. And it's got good preposition use. It's got different tenses. But what's good about that is not that they are all amazing. None of them are amazing. English grammar, it's not like you're trying to be amazing. They all work. It's all functional. Okay. Now this here is called a perfect participle. Okay. It's a perfect participle and it's passive. And that seems really complicated, but it's made up of small things which are understandable that you put together that you just have to remember. Now I've got this little encouraging, motivating sentence here. You can do this. There's no reason why you can't do it. Everyone in this room has complicated thoughts every day, every moment. Everybody here is capable of thinking this. In your own language, you'd write this sentence without even thinking about it. I want you to do it in English, and you can, okay? Because it's you who chooses how to connect information. You've got the ideas, you then need to get them onto the paper. So let's go and have a look at participles and participle clauses. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to review what participles are. Okay. Participles are forms of verbs. Present participles are ing. Okay. So we use those in lots of different ways. We use them in continuous tenses. So how many continuous tenses are there?
3.
You've got
Present continuous,
Present,
past continuous,
past continuous,
perfect continuous,
present perfect,
present perfect continuous,
Well,
past perfect continuous, future continuous. Okay, so there's lots of different ways. Future perfect continuous would be a bit strange. Okay, but there's lots of different ways that we do it. So you might see ing written in lots of different sentences. We also use them in gerunds. Ing are gerunds. What type of word is a gerund?
Noun.
Noun plus
Noun. It's a noun, isn't it? You might also see them in adjectives. Okay, this class is, be kind, guys. This class is
Amazing.
oh, thank you very much. Yeah, okay. So then we've got an adjective ending with ing as well. Okay, so they just get used in loads of different ways. These ings, they're called participles, present participles. Okay, so I love cycling. I am listening. This is boring. Okay, you're going to see ing in lots of different places. Okay, so that's a present participle. Past participles, we use it in the present perfect, we use it in the past perfect, and we use it in the passive. So I have visited Greece 3 times. Where's the past participle in that sentence?
Visited.
Visited.
Visited, yeah, visited. Okay, I was hurt by a football. Where's the past participle?
Hurt.
Was.
No.
Hurt.
Hurt. Yeah, hurt is the past participle. Okay, so what we have to remember is this. It is a past participle and it gets used however we want to use it. We might use it in this sentence, in the passive. We might use it over here in the perfect, or we might use it in a participle clause. The present participle, I might use it as a gerund. I might use it as a continuous verb, or I might use it as a present participle clause. Nozad, have you got a question?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Your hand's up. Put it down. Okay. So it's important for us to know this. What I often say is think of these as vegetables. Okay, let's think of a past participle as a potato. Sometimes you mash a potato, sometimes you roast a potato, sometimes you boil a potato, sometimes you wrap a potato in foil and put it into a barbecue. You do lots of different things with them, but they're always potatoes. Okay, you can slice an onion, you can bite an onion, you can boil an onion, you can roast an onion, you can do whatever you want with an onion, but it's always an onion. And it's the same with these. Okay, we use them in different ways, and in different sentences they do different things, but they're always this at their heart. Okay, so with that in mind, let me show you what I mean by participle clauses. Okay, so let's take this away. Present participle is used to show 2 things which are true at the same time. Okay, it appears as a result sometimes as well. So let's try and think of it. Jumping for joy. Oops, jumping for joy. Paul felt amazing. Jumping for joy, Paul felt amazing. Okay, so we know 2 things about Paul, don't we? 2 things that were happening to Paul. Those things are Paul felt amazing and Paul was jumping for joy. What I'm basically telling you is that those things happened at the same time. Now, jumping for joy, when did that happen? That's the difficult thing to think about, isn't it? Because what you are always thinking about is with all verbs, when. You always have to think of the tense. You always have to think of whether it's active or passive. You always have to think of the subject-verb agreement. But in this case, we've used jumping. Well, how can you tell what the tense is with jumping? Well, the way that you tell what the tense is by using the tense here. Okay. What tense is felt?
Past.
Past. So that tells me that jumping for joy is also in the past. Okay. How about this? Feeling faint, Mrs. Smith asked for a nurse to help her. Okay.
Again.
So is this past, present, or future?
Past.
Past.
Past. How do you know it's the past?
Asked.
Asked. Because of asked. Yeah, okay. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this one happened first and this one happened second, but that might be true in real life, but that's not what I'm telling you now.
Yeah, future.
What I am telling you in this sentence is that these happened at the same time. Okay. Now, can you think of a relationship between those two things? Did one cause the other?
Yes.
Yeah.
One is the cause.
Feeling faint is the cause, isn't it?
Because,
Okay. So if I said Mrs. Smith asked for help, what would you put as a linker now?
cause feeling.
Because
Because
Or
she
She.
felt
she felt.
faint.
She felt.
Remember, guys, you've got to respect the grammar of your linker. Because is always followed with
Well,
a verb clause, so it's got to be because she felt faint. Okay, if it was due to,
having painting.
feeling
due to feeling faint.
Painting.
Now that makes sense, doesn't it? Oh, we don't need Mrs. Smith twice, do we? Okay, now that's okay. So it does sometimes appear like it's a result. Okay, it does feel like that. Remember when I also said this, I fell off my bike and broke my wrist. Do you remember when we did that? And feels like it's showing a result.
Yeah.
It feels like it's showing that this one happened after that one. But technically in English, and is just saying this is another thing which is true. And it's the same with the present participle. The present participle is just supposed to say this is true at the same time as this. And it's not just in the past. Okay, it could be something like feeling confident. Paul is going to apply to Oxford University. Okay, is going to, when do you think this is?
Future.
That's in the future.
Teacher.
Yep. So at the moment, if you think about it, what is happening now?
Feeling.
Feeling confident, and anything else?
Oxford.
I'm planning, aren't I?
I'm thinking, yes.
I'm thinking, I'm planning. Okay.
Thinking.
So what I'm trying to say is that this thing is happening. And something else is happening. Is going to, that means right now.
Plan. Yeah, you planned.
So it's, I could put Paul is thinking about applying to Oxford University. Okay, now we've got these two things at the same time happening now. That's the idea of a present participle clause.
Paul,
Yes.
yeah, but it somehow it shows it's not cause and effect, but it shows the relationship. If you don't feel confident, you will not apply for
Yeah.
Oxford.
Look, that is the absolute foundation of every single time we add another idea to a sentence. It's always, what's the relationship between those two things? Now, put your hand up if you think that this is a bit complicated.
Yeah.
Present participle clauses. It's okay. I'm going to put my hand up as well. My advice to you is
Not use.
don't use it.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's just really, really confusing in a way that the perfect participle is not. And also, I think that the perfect participle, it's actually quite an easy thing to get into your OET writing. This isn't very easy to get into your OET writing. I mean, is it possible to tell the story that, I don't know, I probably wouldn't put it in the storyline, in the story paragraph, in the timeline paragraphs, and I don't think I'd include it in my request either. So I'm really not sure where I put it in. I also think that it's a bit unnatural. Say that again, Ham? In the background?
Yeah, living alone.
Yeah, I suppose she requires assistance with her ADLs. Oh, sorry, she has an in-house meal service. Yeah, I suppose it could be.
In the request
Possibly.
paragraph, maybe.
Possibly that could be something, but it's quite rare. I think that's quite rare. So the reason why I'm saying it is, all grammar's good. Okay, all grammar's great if you get it right. And getting grammar right requires you to practice things. And there are some things like results, causes, relative clauses, and the passive and tenses, which are always in every letter. They're always in every letter. That's quite a lot of things to practice and get right. I want you to get those things right in your OET writing. If you then have time, because you always get those things right, okay, go and practice present participles. Good idea. And once you get that right, get that into your OET writing. But until you're already strong on the other parts, it's going to be less likely that you'll get this right. So what I'm saying is, don't just throw in to your writing things like present participles if you don't understand how they work, because they've got the potential to be very confusing. And we might think when we're examining it, is this a tense error? Is this an issue with a gerund? Or are they trying to use a participle clause? I can't tell. So don't put that kind of doubt in the examiner's mind. All right. The perfect participle, that is definitely a useful thing for us to be able to do. Helen.
Hi, Paul. For using the present participles, shall we use them in the first sentence or in the first part of the sentence, or
my advice, Helen, is don't use them.
Yeah, I get it. If we will use them in some days in the future.
Well, just in general, in terms of participle clauses, they can be in both places, and I'll go into that with this participle clause. Okay.
Thank you.
Show you it. Yeah. So in a perfect participle clause, what you are telling me is that the thing in the participle clause happens before the thing in the second clause. So an example: having fallen off his bike, Paul broke his wrist. Okay, just have a look. Have a look at that one. Okay, having fallen off his bike, Paul broke his wrist. Okay, now there is no doubt in my mind or anybody's mind the order of the events. And the reason why is because I've used the perfect participle. And the perfect participle tells me the sequence of events in a sentence. I don't have to say before or after. I can just use the perfect participle. Now, if I said, having broken his wrist, Paul fell off his bike, I'd be a bit confused. Okay. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's very different. Having fallen off his bike, Paul broke his wrist. That makes me think that Paul was riding his bike and then he fell off the bike, and the result of falling off the bike was to break the wrist. If I say having broken his wrist, Paul fell off his bike, that makes me think that in an earlier incident, Paul had broken his wrist. I don't know how he broke it. Then he tried to ride his bike, but because he had a broken wrist, he fell off. And that's very different. And the reason I think that is because of using the perfect participle. So what makes it the perfect participle is this having plus the past participle. That makes it the perfect participle. Okay, it's not the past participle, it's the perfect participle, because we make the present perfect and the past perfect with the modal, with the auxiliary verb have plus the past participle. So having plus the past participle is the perfect participle. Now I find that much easier to understand and to think about than the present participle. Okay, so having broken his wrist, Paul fell off his bike. He broke his wrist first, he fell off his bike. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Sorry, Paul, instead of having broken his wrist, we can also use the other result of.
You can say a sentence in lots of different ways.
Yeah, but what's the difference if we use that, I mean, the results instead of having?
There's no difference.
If
So-
it's a number in writing or something in POET, it affects the number.
I would say that using the perfect participle is probably something where the examiners say, okay, this person understands how to sequence their language
Okay.
in a way which is quite good. I would say it's a higher level of writing than using because.
Okay.
So if you said, if I take this away, Paul fell off his bike. Okay, let's look at how we can make it more. Okay, so Paul fell off his bike, Paul broke his wrist. Okay, that's the most basic way we can do it. Then I could do the same thing again. And I can do, he broke his wrist. Oh, now I'm using a pronoun and I'm making it a little better. Then I can do the same thing and I could say, and he broke his wrist. Okay. Then I could do something like Paul fell off his bike, resulting in him breaking his wrist. Oh, okay. Actually, I could probably put one in the middle as well. I could probably say, and as a result. Paul fell off his bike, and as a result, he broke his wrist. So as every sentence goes down, it's becoming more and more complicated. Having fallen off his bike, Paul broke his wrist. You can, for me, that's how it gets more and more complicated. We go from two sentences into one sentence. Then we start using a linker with punctuation. Then we start using a linker that requires a noun after it. Then we start using a perfect participle. And I think that we can see there how it becomes more and more complex. And what do you think, guys? Does it I know everyone thinks complicated equals better. Okay, that's not the case for me. When I read people's OET writing, I'm not looking for complicated. What I'm looking for is fluent and clear. Now, as we go down, do you feel like it gets better? Or does it just get more complicated? So are we happy with this one? Paul fell off his bike, Paul broke his wrist. Does that sound good to you?
No.
No.
That's not good, is it? What about this? Paul fell off his bike, he broke his wrist.
No.
Not really. What about this one?
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay, isn't it? I don't mind it. What about this one?
No.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Yes.
I like that better. I do like that. What about this one?
مقابل.
that's good.
Better.
It's good, isn't it? I've
Yeah.
got to say though, somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm thinking it's risky to write that sentence. It's not, it doesn't, it's no better than as a result. For me, it's no better. It feels a bit more complicated unnecessarily. What do we think about the perfect participle?
I think it's perfect.
It's like
Yes.
Nice, isn't it?
Yes.
It's got a good balance. It's got a little bit of complexity and good level of grammar, but it's not really complicated. I don't think it's difficult to do. Compared to this one, I think that these noun linkers resulting in, due to, as a result of, they're complicated to use. But I don't think that the perfect participle is really that complicated. And I think that we can do some practice and show that we can do it. Okay.
Hello, Paul.
Yes, Nozad, go on. You got a question?
Yeah, in these examples that you explained about perfect, I mean, having, yeah, about the perfect one.
Mhm.
All the second part of the sentences, it is simple past, but after, I mean, participle, we can use any tenses. For example, having completed the university, I will go to New York, or I will get the good job. We can use any tenses.
Yeah, the whole point of the perfect participle is not to say when, it's to say what the sequence is. And that's a bit different. So I'm not saying by using this that this happened in the past. That's not the point of it. What I'm trying to say is it happens before the next thing I'm going to say. So the next thing that I say, if I say that this is in the past, then you know that this happened before this. So if I broke my wrist at 7:10, I fell off my bike at 7:10 minus 10 seconds. Yeah, or 1 second. If I tell you that having passed my exam, I will move to the US. Okay, what I'm telling you is that this has already happened and that this is going to happen in the future. That's all I'm telling you, that this is before this. Yeah, it could be having passed my exam, I feel amazing. Okay, having passed my exam, I feel amazing. That's good as well. It's just before this. That's what we need to remember. Ismail, you got a question?
Hi, Paul. Yeah, if I feel confident enough, should I write in my writing this?
I think so. And I think there's a direct place that you can use it in a lot of letters in the timeline paragraph.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
In the timeline paragraph, we quite often get multiple dates, don't we?
Yeah.
And what you could do is you could say, well, I don't really want to focus on the first two because it's just a presentation of symptoms which get a little bit worse. It's not until the third that I see that there are really significant developments. So what I'll say is I'll start my story here, but I'll use a perfect participle. Having been to the surgery twice before with similar symptoms, Mr. Smith presented with, and then you can do it like that. And if you think about it, it's really similar to past perfect. Really similar to past perfect, because in past perfect, if you start a story at a later point and refer back, you use the past perfect, don't you?
Yeah.
So let's go and have a look at some example. Let's put it into practice. Okay, so let's do exercise 1, Mr. Edwards. Okay. Now, what can we do here? What can we do? Think about the situation. What do you think needs to be done?
Link.
No, in terms of the situation, what needs to be done?
One test for anemia.
A test for anemia. Yeah. a test for anemia. That's what needs to be done. Why?
Because of intermittent diarrhea and constipation.
Okay, so let's do because. Let's do because. Mr. Edwards requires an anemia test because he has experienced intermittent constipation for the last 2 months. Does that make sense, that sentence?
Yes.
Yeah, we've got because, haven't we? We've got because. And because shows us causes. Okay. So, Ezgi, are you there?
Hello.
Hi, Ezgi. Okay, so because shows me a cause, doesn't it?
Yes.
So what we can see is up to today, 2 months, starting 2 months ago, intermittent constipation. If I wanted to put that into a result, I could start with this bit, couldn't I?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Edwards has experienced intermittent constipation for the last 2 months, and as a result,
he is requiring
I would just put he requires. Let's just keep it simple. Yeah. He requires
an anemia test.
an anemia test. Okay, that's nice. That's a really good way to do it. Now, what you're doing in both of these sentences, and stay with me, Ezgi, what we're doing in both of these sentences is we're choosing to put a cause and result relationship between the two clauses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we don't have to do that. We could put it into 2 sentences. We could say, Mr. Edwards has experienced intermittent constipation for the last 2 months. Mr. Edwards requires an anemia test. We've all decided we don't like that. We all think that this is quite good. We like these 2. That makes sense. It's really clear. But if I wanted to, I could just sequence those, couldn't I? So, Ezgi,
Yes, sir.
which came first, the constipation or the anemia test?
Constipation, because it's a symptom.
It's the symptom, and the test, we need to do the test to find out, is there an underlying problem?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So let's use what part would we're trying to say one happened before the other. So which participle clause would we use?
Perfect.
The perfect participle.
He has been
So
Having.
having experienced,
intermittent constipation for the last 2 months.
that's what we can put. Yeah, I think that should have an S, shouldn't it? Sorry, last 2 months. Comma, Mr. Edwards requires an anemia test. Okay, now what do we think of that sentence, guys? Does it make sense for us?
Yeah.
What you've told me is the diarrhea first, test second.
Yeah.
The test hasn't happened yet, but it will be second. So having experienced is our perfect participle. Okay. I am telling you that this happened first. That's the whole point of the perfect participle. What do you think, Ezgi? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. It's just, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You always say it's only matters the clarity in your letter, in OET especially. Is it okay that we write the sentences in 2 apart sentences, or
okay, so up to a point. Up to a point, yeah. So this is, for me, because is not complicated. And I don't think anyone who's examining an OET letter would think that that was complicated.
Clause is not complicated. Yeah.
It's very, very clear. So if you put that into 2 sentences, I think you'd be marked, well, you wouldn't be marked up. You wouldn't be marked down, but I think that they would just say, you've missed an opportunity to connect case notes together and show the relationship between them.
Yeah.
And it makes your writing less fluent when you've got lots of simple clause sentences. I think all 3 of these have got clarity and fluency to them. Okay. So I don't think this is unnecessarily complicated at all.
Yes.
Right. And the clarity's there. Let's do the next one. Okay, let's do the next one. Let's go. Yelena. Are you there, Yelena?
Paul, I have a question very quick.
Very quick. Go on.
Yes. Just if I remove the having intermittent constipation for the last 2 months, just remove the participle. Is it wrong then?
Well, yeah, because then it's a present participle.
Yeah.
And then that wouldn't be correct. You wouldn't use the present participle to do that. You've put on for the last 2 months and it makes it seem like it makes sense, but it's not, it wouldn't be the correct usage of it. I'm not saying people don't do it, Zaki. People do that, but it wouldn't be good for your writing. All right. Okay. So Yelena, what do you think looking at this then?
Having 6 children.
Yeah. Okay.
Sarah Johnson is feeling or feels that cannot cope.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Like she cannot cope. Now, what can often happen is this having, people get it confused with having experienced, part of the perfect participle, but it's not quite right, is it? How about this one? What am I asking to happen here, Yelena? It's a referral, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So how about I wanted to say feeling like she cannot cope. Sarah Johnson requires a referral to a psychiatrist. Now, this is why I don't really like it, because you can't argue. You can't argue that that's accurate. It is accurate, but it doesn't feel very natural to me. Okay, I feel like it's not very natural, and it's hard for me to explain that, but I don't think it seems very professional to do it. Having 6 children, I think that one could work. I'm thinking of something like Catherine Walter, a medicine task. You could possibly write that sentence. But for me personally, present participle clauses don't feel very natural or professional, whereas the perfect participles do. Okay, so we're going to come back tomorrow. We're going to do a bit more work on participle clauses. Okay, I'm going to put you into groups. You can write some sentences, and then when we get to the end of the week, we're going to do a big review, okay, of all of the different ways that you can add ideas into sentences. So try and make sure you're here for that one. Okay, let's finish there, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. All right, guys?
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.